SARS sees more than you think. And there is no way you can hide away from SARS. And then you ask yourself, how? How do they see these things? We must note that SARS has an extensive network through third-party data. And locally here in South Africa, SARS requires your banks, your insurers, your medical aids schemes. You can mention even more to submit electronic reports every filing season or every year in the form of IT3s. Right. And through this, they're able to see the income that you are earning, your contributions, and etc. here in South Africa. Then now, internationally, through the automatic exchange of information framework, SARS also gets your information of the income that you are earning, as tax authorities across the world are able to share financial data amongst themselves. So the bottom line to this is that you cannot hide. No matter where you are, no matter what you are doing, SARS still sees that.
The only difference between death and taxes is that death doesn't get worse every time Congress meets. This is a famous quote by Will Rogers, an American actor and social commentator. Hello and welcome to today's episode. I'm Ulemu Moya, and today I'll be joined by Rendani, who is an intern here at Tax Consulting South Africa in the cross-border taxation team. Today we'll be learning 5 lessons on ceasing South African tax residency and his journey from university into the world of practice. Hello and welcome, Rendani.
Thank you so much, Ulemu. It's a pleasure for you to have me today.
Thank you so much. So let's start at the beginning. Your article is titled Beyond Textbooks, the Tax Lessons You Only Learn on the Job. What motivated you to write it?
Thank you so much. Looking back at my uni days, while studying, I had questions that, gross income definition, Income Tax Act, but one had the desire to see the practicality into it. And fortunate enough, I found myself at Tax Consulting South Africa. And while I've been here working closely with the cross-border taxation team, I noticed the huge jump from university to the corporate world. And in this, it made me realize that yes, one can come in with a base understanding or knowledge from your degree from university, but it requires the extra mile when now you're in corporate and you're dealing with real life clients. Because now, when you look back in university, the focus is on you being able to answer questions, answer exams for you to pass. But now, when you are in the real world and you're in practice, you need to apply the practicality into it. And now the complex part comes in where now different clients have different scenarios. It's unlike in university where the formats never change. The taxable income calculation remains the same. But then now when you come into practice, scenarios are different. And now you need to apply yourself differently into that. And for you to ensure that your work is accurate, it requires one to take an extra step. And in me writing this piece was just to share my experience and how different the change was, as well as share the lessons that I learned outside a textbook or my degree.
Thank you so much for that. So let's jump into the first lesson. Leaving South Africa is easy, but leaving SARS requires the golden letter. So please tell the viewers, what exactly is the golden letter?
No, for sure. So a golden letter is what we formally call a non-residency confirmation letter. And this is a letter that a South African tax resident obtains when they cease their South African tax residency. So it's key. You only obtain this letter or confirmation after you formally applied to SARS that you have the intentions to go live and work abroad, and for thus you ought not to be further considered as a South African tax residency. And the key thing into this is for one to understand that there are different tax treatment for a South African tax resident as well as a South African non-tax residents, with the key thing being that South African tax residents are taxed on their worldwide income, whereas South African non-tax residents are taxed on their South African sourced income. So this ensures that now when you are now working and living abroad as a South African, you're not taxed in two countries, one being the foreign country that you are situated in, as well as South Africa Africa where you're no longer at, but because you were born there and considered a resident there, you would still be taxed if you don't cease. So overall, the golden letter is what SARS requires of you to ensure that you're not double taxed or you officially cease your South African tax residency.
Thank you so much. So it's not just about moving, but it's about making sure that the tax authorities know that you've left the country.
Correct.
So that brings us to the next question. What happens to your assets once you have seized your tax residency?
That's a good one. And believe me, most people might miss this one. So when you cease your South African tax residency, SARS deems you to have disposed your worldwide assets, right? And with that being done, certain assets are now exposed to what we call exit tax, which is capital gains tax, deemed capital gains tax. However, in that way, it is important to note that certain assets are excluded from exit tax, which include your South African immovable property or assets that have a permanent establishment in South Africa. But when now you leave the rest of the assets, SARS wants a piece in the growth of their value. For example, you would have bought an asset and then now it has gained value over years while in South Africa. So now, before you officially seize your South African tax residency, SARS would want a piece of the growth of your assets. Basically, SARS would want a piece of your wealth that you're able to accumulate while you're in South Africa before you leave the country.
Thank you. So let's say I have seized my tax residency. What
Yes.
are the consequences that come with me selling my property here in South Africa?
That's a good one. So now that we have explained that South African immovable property does not fall within the assets that are exposed to deemed capital gains, now when you have ceased your South African tax residency, you're now considered a non-res. At a later stage where you feel like, oh, now I want to sell my home in Johannesburg that I had because I don't see myself coming back and I'm not using it for anything, that doesn't mean there's nothing that happens from a tax side. If that happens in the near future, you trigger a different regime known as withholdings tax. But it is also important to notice that withholding tax comes into play if the gross selling price of the property is above 2 million. And then there are also different tax rates that are applicable depending on who is selling this property. So if you are a non-res individual, 7.5% will then be taxed on the selling price if the property exceeds 2 million. But then now if you're a company, 10% is then now withheld. And then if you are a trust, 15% is withheld. But the important thing is that the purchaser of the property must ensure that before they pay you as the seller the amount, they must withhold that specific percentage. And it's in the keyword withholdings tax.
Thank you for that, Rendani. So I think one might wonder, if I keep a low profile from SARS or I stay off of social media, how would SARS know?
Well, Ulemo, SARS sees more than you think. And there is no way you can hide away from SARS. And then you ask yourself, how? How do they see these things? We must note that SARS has an extensive network through third-party data. And locally here in South Africa, SARS requires your banks, your insurers, your medical aids schemes. You can mention even more to submit electronic reports every filing season or every year in the form of IT3s. Right. And through this, they're able to see the income that you are earning, your contributions, and etc. here in South Africa. Then now, internationally, through the automatic exchange of information framework, SARS also gets your information of the income that you are earning, as tax authorities across the world are able to share financial data amongst themselves. So the bottom line to this is that you cannot hide. No matter where you are, no matter what you are doing, SARS still sees that. Then this shows us that SARS doesn't rely mostly on our honesty as taxpayers. SARS goes the extra mile. It looks into the hot data that it finds through third-party data information versus what is declared on your return. So there's no way SARS wouldn't know about your financial and income and your whereabouts around the world. So the key thing to notice is that you cannot hide, you better file right.
Thank you. So I think it's clear that seizing tax residency is a very formal process that requires
Mm,
a lot of legal and technical planning. So you
correct.
can't just walk away. You always need to make sure that you tie up all the loose ends.
Yes, that's 100% correct. And to further elaborate on that, is that there's a common misconception that once I leave South Africa, I go work abroad, I no longer have tax obligation back in South Africa, which is incorrect. That is so wrong for you to believe in. And the reason why I say this is because through my experience now here at Tax Consulting and together with the cross-border taxation team, is that you find someone would come back after leaving South Africa for a long time, and SARS has knocked at their door like, oh, you owe this amount of money. And then people, out of panic, they don't know what to do, they don't have the money. And one key lesson to take out of this is that you need to do it the right way. And seizing a South African tax residency needs to be done through an application through SARS. And it's very complex because you need to now prove your intention on why you need to seize your South African tax residency. And the advice that we can give people out there is that get advice from attorneys or experts. Expert attorneys, file correctly, and ensure that you prove your case before SARS prove it to you.
Thank you so much, Rendani. This was such an informative session. And thank you for joining today's episode.
Thank you.
Hi, YouTube. Ulemu here. Have you ever considered seizing your South African tax residency? Or have you ever encountered any challenges during the process? Comment down below to share your story.